What's going on, ladies and gents? Mr. Dickin here. In this video, we are going to discuss how to solve quadratics using the quadratic formula. Now, most of you have probably seen this formula before. Whether or not we remember, that might be a different story. With quadratic formula, there are several videos available online on YouTube for ways to remember this through song. So if you find yourself bored on a rainy afternoon, might I suggest perusing down that rabbit hole and watching some hilarious quadratic formula song videos. My personal favorite was a video put out back in like 2010, I believe, set to the tune of Justin Bieber's Baby. Total banger. All right, so quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is a way to solve quadratic equations so long as they're written in the format of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So the big thing here is that we always want to equal it out to 0. Now, sometimes there might be stuff on both sides of the equal sign. Not the end of the world, just throw everything to one side. I prefer to throw everything onto the left side of the equal sign. Your a value is going to be whatever the coefficient is on the x squared. Sometimes it's a 1. In that case, it won't be written. If it's just a negative sign in front of the x squared, you would call that a negative 1. Your b value is going to be the coefficient of your linear term, of the plain old x term, and your c value, that's just your constant, or the y-intercept if we were to graph that. All right, the quadratic formula states we're going to take the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, quadratic formula is kind of nice because it works for every single quadratic function, whether or not it's factorable. So up until this point, we've been dealing with factoring and completing the square. Completing the square is great in certain scenarios. Factoring is great in certain scenarios. But they don't always work, and they don't always work fast. Quadratic formula will always work, although it's not very fast. All right. Also, we can expect to get two answers out of this. The two answers come disguised within this plus or minus symbol. Another thing to take note, this value of b squared minus 4ac, that's something called the discriminant, and that's going to tell us whether or not we're even going to have any solutions. Because if this discriminant, what I have highlighted in yellow, if that turns into a negative number when I plug things in, we know we can't take the square root of a negative value to get real solutions. So if this is a negative value, I can kind of stop what I'm doing and say, okay, this thing has no real solutions. I don't need to keep going from there. All right, let's see some examples. All right, first one, 2x squared minus 6x plus 1. This is already set equal to 0, so that's awesome. My a value is 2. That's supposed to be a highlighter. There we go. A value is 2, b value is a negative 6, c value is a positive 1. So if I were to plug things in, I've got negative 6, so the opposite of negative 6, plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared, and I realize you guys can do that in your head, minus 4 times a, in this case was 2, times 1, which is our c value, all over, ooh, that was not supposed to go straight through the 6. I'm sorry about that. Gross. All over 2 times a, and again, a was 2. All right, so now let's clean things up. Me personally, I like to start off with the opposite of b and the 2a, just because that's real fast mental math stuff. Opposite of negative 6 is positive 6. Down below, 2 times 2, that's 4. The stuff under the radical is what might take a little bit of time. All right, so I've got, let's see, negative 6 squared. That would be a positive 36, minus 4 times 2 times 1 is 8. So 36 minus 8, that's 28. Now 28 is not going to be a clean square root. 28 does not give us a nice radical. I mean, if you wanted to, you could simplify it to 2 rad 7, but that's a lesson for a different day. So right now, if I were to leave it as is, that would be an exact answer. However, this is telling us to give exact answers and answers rounded to the nearest hundredth. So Here's our exact answer. But if I wanted answers in decimal form, well, I would have to actually compute what is the square root of 28. Well, I know it's going to be 5 point something, because 5 squared is 25. So if I did the square root of 28, it would be 5 point stuff. So 6 plus 5 point stuff would be 11 point stuff. Divide that by 4. And then 6 minus 5 point stuff is just a small decimal. Divide that by 4. When we do that, our two answers that we will get are going to be x equals, I've been forgetting x equals this whole time, I'm sorry. Hey-o. 0.177, how far are we supposed to round? 100th, so 0.18. And x equals 2.82. So these are the rounded answers. This would be an exact answer, and that exact answer has not been simplified, but again, that's a lesson for a different day. Since we have a radical that cannot simplify, it's not a clean square root, this would be called an irrational number. All right, next one. Same process, so we're going to set this up. The opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, 4 times 2 times 1, all over 2a. So negative 2 up top, 4 down below. Let's see what's underneath that radical. Oh gosh, I've ruined the radical. All right, we have 2 squared, that's 4, minus 8, well that's negative 4. Hey, we got a negative. Anytime you have a negative underneath the radical, we will have no real solutions. No real solutions. That means this parabola would never, ever, 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 ever hit the x-axis. So chances are, if I kind of visualize this, it's probably a parabola that looks something like that. Okay. Let's do 2 more. We'll see an application problem, then we'll get into discriminant talk, and then we'll call it a day. Shall we? Shall we? Cool. All right, so same thing. We're going to solve by quadratic formula. I'll go through these a little bit quicker this time. So the opposite of b, negative 8, plus or minus the square root of b squared, 8 squared is 64, minus 4ac. Well, a is 1, c is 12, so 4 times 1 times 12 is 48. All over 2a, a is just 1, so that would be a 2. All right, so now we continue to solve. This would be negative 8 plus or minus square root of, that would be 16, all over 2. Hey, we know the square root of 16, don't we? That's just 4. So negative 8 plus or minus 4 all over 2. So again, here's where I'm going to get my two answers. I'm going to have negative 8 plus 4 all over 2, and then negative 8 minus 4 all over 2. So really, I just took this plus or minus symbol and kind of divvied it up into a plus and into a minus. So negative 8 plus 4, that is negative 4. Divide that by 2. We'll get x equals negative 2. Negative 8 minus 4 is negative 12. Divide that by 2, we'll get a negative 6. All right, next one. 2x squared minus x minus 4. So right here, we have a minus x. That means my b value is going to be a negative 1. My b value will be a negative 1. So the opposite of b is positive 1. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. That's just 1. Minus 4ac. So 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 4, all over 2a, and that was 2 times 2. All right. So 1 plus or minus. All right, 1 minus, this would be 4 times 2, that's 8 times 4 is 32. So 1 minus, and it's negative, so 1 minus negative 32, well, that would be 1 plus 32, so that's really a 33. So 1 plus or minus the square root of 33 all over 4. So again, this right now is written in exact form, because as soon as I take the square root of 33 and round that decimal, I've rounded it and it's no longer as accurate. I can tell you, though, that the square root of 33 is going to be somewhere between 5 and 6, because 5 squared is 25, 6 squared is 36. So we're going to have 1 plus or minus 5-ish. Divide that by 4. So when we do that, the two answers we'll get are going to be negative 1.19 after rounding and positive 1.69 after rounding. Since we had a nasty radical that could not reduce down to a clean rational number, we have an irrational solution set. All right, now let's see an example for an application like a word problem. Your school's jazz band is selling CDs as a fundraiser. That sentence alone already tells you that this is a dated problem. I don't think any high school student has bought a CD in years. The total profit P depends on the amount X that your band charges for each CD. So if you don't charge a lot, you're not going to make a whole lot of profit. If you charge too much, people probably don't want to buy it. The equation is given, negative x squared plus 48x minus 300. What is the least amount in dollars you can charge for a CD to make a profit of $200? All right. So visually, here's kind of what I'm imagining. We've got a negative parabola that has a y-intercept at negative 300. So the y-intercept would be somewhere down here, and the parabola is going to do something like that. They're asking us, what is the least you can charge to make a profit of 200? So if we think of this is the x-axis and this is the y-axis, or profit, we want to know, let's say if that's 200, how much would we have to charge to make that profit amount? Well, based on my sketch, it looks like that happens in two spots. Since they're talking about the least amount, that's supposed to be a question mark, not a 3. The least amount, we're going to do the smaller of the two. All right, so let's get solving. First and foremost, we want the profit of 200, so they give us a p-value to use. So that allows me to set up my equation, set equal to 200. Now we know that quadratic formula likes things equal to 0, so I'll just kick that 200 to the other side. Negative x squared plus 48x minus 500. And now we've got a quadratic formula that we can use. Numbers are going to be a little bit bigger here, but hey, you've got a calculator, so no reason to fear big numbers if you got a calculator. Am I right? All right. So, opposite of b, negative 48. Plus or minus the square root of 48 squared. Ooh, big number, big number, big number. So that'd be 2304. Minus 4 times a times c. 4 times a times c. Well, 4 times a is negative 1, so that'd be a positive 4. Or sorry, negative 4. Times 500. Dang. So we're going to have minus, well, that'd be a plus because we have minus, nope, there's two negatives. What am I doing? What am I doing? Minus 2,000. All over 2a, so that'd be negative 2. Now when we solve this and simplify, we should get our answers to be 15.28 and x equals 32.72. This problem was asking us to find the least amount, so that would be $15.28. You could also charge $32 to get that same profit, but this wanted the least amount. All right, now let's get into discriminant. I would advise pausing the video here just so you have a chance to write these down, but you do you. So the discriminant is that piece that we kind of discussed way back at the beginning of this video. And that's the portion of the quadratic formula that is underneath the radical. That is b squared minus 4ac. And that's going to tell you how many solutions you're going to have. Whether the discriminant is a positive value, a negative value, or if it's exactly 0. So if you have a positive discriminant, if you have a positive number underneath the square root, well, every positive number has 2 square roots. They might not be clean and pretty, but there's 2 of them. For instance, the square root of 9 is 3 or negative 3. The square root of 16 is 4 or negative 4. If you have a negative number underneath a radical, there are no real solutions. We don't like taking square roots of negatives. And if you have a 0 underneath your radical, then there's only one square root, because we can't really apply the whole positive negative logic to zeros, because 0 is neither positive nor negative. All right, so we're going to find the discriminant on each one of these, doing b squared minus 4ac for every single one. So for number 1, b squared, that's 4 squared, is 16, minus 4 times 3 times negative 5. So that's going to turn to a plus. 4 times 3 is 12, times 5, 60. Well, that's 76. That's positive, so there would be 2 real solutions. Next one, b squared, so negative 6 squared is 36, minus 4ac, so 4 times 9 times 1. Apparently I'm actually writing this one out. So that'd be 36 minus 36, that's 0. So that means there's only one real solution. Again, the value, come on now, the value that we get as the discriminant will just tell us how many solutions to expect and what type of solutions. Next up, 3x squared minus 8x plus 7. So if I do b squared, that would be 64, minus 4 times a times c. So that'd be 64 minus, let's see, 4 times 3 is 12, times 7 is 84. Or you could do 3 times 7 is 21, times 4 is 84. Doesn't matter. So 64 minus 84, that's going to give me negative 20. Well, negative 20 is negative. So that means there are no real solutions. Instead, we would have 2 imaginary solutions. All right, that is it. That is all for this video, folks. Hopefully you found it informative. Make sure at some point you go check out some YouTube quadratic formula videos. There are some straight fire bangers on there. You're going to love it. You know the drill. If you have any questions, please let me know. And as always, good luck, have fun, be safe, roll tide.